So let's start off with move right into our program, and we will start off with a brief overview of the SuMaNu project. And for that, I would like to introduce Minna Sarvi. Minna is the coordinator of the SuMaNu project, the platform project. Minna is a researcher at LUKE, which is the Finnish Natural Resources Institute of Finland. And there she's worked for the past 10 years with nutrient recycling and issues related to the use of recycled fertilizers. And so I'll turn the microphone over to Minna, and she'll tell a little bit about SuMaNu.
Thank you, Erik, and welcome from my side too to SuMaNu's final conference. I will present those SuMaNu's policy recommendations on more sustainable manure and nutrient management later in this event, but first a couple of words about what is SuMaNu exactly. It is indirect Baltic Sea Region funded project platform, and it started October 2018, and it will end by the end of this month. And practically 4 different projects form SuMaNu, and these projects are manure standards, Baltic slurry acidification, bonus promise, and green Agri. And all of these projects have dealt the issue of sustainable manure and nutrient management from different aspects. But of course, in addition to these participating projects, there have been also other previous EU-funded projects such as Baltic Manure, Baltic Compass, and Baltic Deal, focusing on the same issue. So in practice, this means that there have been lots of EU-funded work in this issue since 2007 when Baltic Compass started. And we have much information from this issue from different aspects, but the synthesis of these results and knowledge has been missing, and that's the aim of SuMaNu project platform. And how the process has gone, the first step was to synthesize the results of these previous EU-funded projects, focusing on more sustainable manure and nutrient management. And based on this synthesis, we have compiled policy recommendations, and we have also supported the process of developing HELCOM nutrient recycling strategy and updating Baltic Sea Action Plan, and we have also given input for EU's BSR. But this is in a nutshell what SuMaNu is, and I welcome also from my side once again you, and I wish you will have a pleasant 2 hours with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Minna. That was just a quick overview of the SuMaNu project, and now I would like to introduce Dr. Sari Luostarinen. Sari is a principal scientist at LUKE, the Natural Resource Institute of Finland, and Sari has more than 20 years of experience working with nutrient recycling, manure management, and different processing technologies for manure. She's also currently the chair of the HELCOM group on sustainable agricultural practices. And Sari, please keep your camera on as you have your presentation so that we can see you as well. And I turn the floor over now to Sari. Thank you.
Thank you, Erik. I will keep the camera on as requested, and I now try to share my screen, and hopefully you can see the slides. Yeah, I'm going to briefly take you to the topic that we are discussing today, and try to give you some ideas of what it is about, and then lead you on to the recommendations that SuMaNu has made, and the issues that how these things are now managed in different countries around the Baltic Sea. The issue of nutrient use and the need to recycle nutrients and to reduce nutrient losses into the environment is now a bit of a hot topic also in the EU. We are talking about the circular economy, and there's distinct targets to improve nutrient use efficiency in the EU in the Green Deal and also in the Common Agricultural Policy. And they all deal with circularity and climate neutrality and resource efficiency and restoration of biological diversity and reduction of pollution. So we should be able to use nutrients in agriculture better in the future than currently is being done. So in the EU Farm to Fork strategy, there's a specific target for nutrients. So by 2030, we should be able to reduce nutrient losses into the environment by at least 50%. And at the same time ensure that the soils in the fields are kept in good condition. It is also aimed that this decrease in losses would reduce the use of fertilizers by at least 20%. Now, 2030 is really close by, so this is a really ambitious target. And we really need measures, many different kinds of measures to be able to achieve it. Within the Baltic Sea region, nutrient use and nutrient losses into the sea are a really important issue that the countries have been struggling with for years already. And there's still a need to cut down the losses to the sea, as the eutrophication is one of the main challenges in the Baltic Sea, and agricultural losses are the main reason for the additional nutrient runoff at the moment. So we will be needing a lot of measures in this region, especially also in line with the target of improving the status of the Baltic Sea. And the Baltic Sea Action Plan of HELCOM is at the moment being updated, and it will contain several old and several new measures addressing nutrient management with the aim of reducing nutrient input from all human activities into the sea, and at the same time also restoring biodiversity and implementing a nutrient recycling strategy, which is also aimed at trying to reduce nutrient use. So this HELCOM regional nutrient recycling strategy for the Baltic Sea envisions that in the future nutrients are managed sustainably in all HELCOM countries, so that we can secure the productivity of agriculture, but also minimize nutrient loss to the sea. And this is done by efficient use of nutrients and cost-effective nutrient recycling. There will be many objectives and sub-objectives and suggested measures and actions how this can be done. And in general, the Baltic Sea region wishes to be a model area for nutrient recycling and show how we can reduce environmental impacts and do it safely from the perspective of the nature and also of humans. So we will need also knowledge exchange and awareness raising of the potential measures, how this can be done and how it should be implemented. We need to create new business opportunities and support the production and the growth of the market for nutrient recycling products. And we also need improved policy coherence so that the different sectors will be discussing with each other, and we're aiming at the same goal. At the moment, in the different Baltic Sea countries, the status of nutrient recycling varies significantly. Some are working a bit ahead, and some are just starting. So when we talk about nutrient recycling, we're sort of trying to do it as the nature intended it. So instead of always taking new mineral or other infinite nutrients from the environment, we try to use the those nutrients that are already being used in our, for instance, food system. So here's a picture of the manure management cycle that should be working efficiently and without any losses into the environment as far as we can prevent them. And this nutrient recycling should at the same time then also reduce our dependence on mineral fertilizer products and take us back towards more closed nutrient and also carbon recycling. So what is needed on the farms is that the animal farms should make better use of manure that they are producing in their own production system. So they should use the best available techniques to minimize losses into the environment and manage the manure in the best potential ways, and also be really precise with the fertilization. And they should also be able to check whether there is surplus manure on their hands, and there should be better ways to recycle that part of the manure to other farms, to crop producing farms, for instance, and thereby also reduce their need for mineral fertilizers. Always this doesn't work in a way that you can just sort of hand over the additional manure that you have to the neighboring farms. There might be a situation where the animal production is so concentrated on a certain region that you would also need to think about regional changes in manure and other nutrient recycling strategies. So here's a few maps of Finland, and we have been comparing the availability of manure phosphorus and the crops' need for phosphorus fertilization in that same area. And you can see that along the western coastline of Finland, there are regions that have a surplus of manure phosphorus for the need of the crop production on that same region. And once you look into a more detailed into the locations, here's a municipality level of one region in the southwestern coastline. There might be within the same sort of governance zone, you might have municipalities with too much manure phosphorus and then others in need of it. So you would need to have ways to facilitate moving part of the manure nutrients from these areas of dense livestock production to the areas in need of fertilization with more dense crop production. And here's an example of how it could be done, so that you would have some of the manure forwarded to a processing plant. And here you can see a mass balance with a big slurry being first digested anaerobically, and you get some biogas and a lot of digestate in the mass. It's still mostly digestate. Then you might centrifuge it to produce two different fractions, the solid and liquid fraction. But the liquid fraction is still a really high proportion of the original volume. And to be able to transport it more efficiently, one might choose to process it further and concentrate the nutrients into a smaller volume to facilitate the transportation to other regions. And in this particular example, you would get nitrogen fertilizer, ammonium sulfate, with most of the original nitrogen in the big slurry. Then there would be another liquid product with some phosphorus and nitrogen. And then after pyrolysis of the solid fraction, you would have a really small volume of very phosphorus-rich fertilizer product. And that would also contain very good organic material to improve the condition of the soil. And a large part of what is left behind is also rather pure process water, which you could maybe use for other purposes or to dilute the original feed or whatever. We have compiled a lot of these principles into two reports in the SuMaNu project. So the other one is more focused on actions on the farm, and the other one then for actions on a larger scale manure processing. And you're welcome to read them and find out a lot more. So in my conclusion, I would say that we need solutions for better recycling of nutrients and also of carbon around the world, where we have been accustomed to using mineral fertilizers too much, and we should be able to use the already existing nutrients in the food system better. And to make this change happen, the transnational regulation, action plans, strategies can and should push these improved nutrient management forward as an integral part of a sustainable food system and efficient circular economy. And there will be changes in and variability in what measures would be the best for which country, and also maybe even sub-regionally within a country. So we need a lot of different types of measures where one can choose the best ones from. And we're sort of in a place where forerunners could set an example really and make this happen and show us all the others also that how this can be done. So I'm hoping that we will see a lot of actions in the future towards a more circular agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Sari. Thank you, Sari, for talking to us about some of the practices and technologies dealt with in the project for sustainable manure management. And now I'll give the floor back to Minna, who will talk to us more about the specific policy recommendations that were brought up, that were developed in the SuMaNu project. So the floor is yours, Minna.
Thank you, Erik. Can you now see my presentation and my face, Erik?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so I will present you now our policy recommendations that we have compiled in SuMaNu project platform. And as mentioned earlier, we have compiled altogether 6 policy recommendations based on the results of earlier projects handling manure and nutrient management issues. And first of these recommendations handles development of coherent bee fertilization policies in the Baltic Sea region. And the second one, fertilization planning and nutrient balancing. The third recommendation focuses on national standards for handling and spreading manure. And this fourth recommendation tackles the issue at regional level and focuses on regional nutrient reallocation that Sari already presented at some level. And the fifth recommendation concerns harmful substances and hygienic issues. And our last recommendations concerns knowledge transfer. Then let's start with the first recommendation of development of coherent bee fertilization policies in the Baltic Sea region. In detail, SuMaNu recommends that there should be set a regulatory maximum limit for bee fertilization. Same way as set in nitric directive for nitrogen, also phosphorus should have some kind of regulatory maximum limit for application. The minimum demand is that it would be a flat rate if there is no strict bee regulation existing. The flat rate limit would be the most basic regulatory measure, but it can still lead to over-fertilization with bee, as it doesn't take account soil phosphorus status and crop phosphorus need account. But it would be quite easy to implement, however. But optimally, in optimum world, these phosphorus limits should be based on crop need and soil phosphorus status, and they should be applied for all phosphorus fertilizers. This way, there would not be over-fertilization with phosphorus. But in conclusion, regulation is needed in addition to recommendations and voluntary measures to steer towards more sustainable phosphorus use in agriculture. Then, in addition to regulation, we need also national guidelines to give a framework for feed level fertilization planning. Thus, there should be developed and they should be updated national guidelines for nitrogen and phosphorus application rates, and they should take account for crop nitrogen and phosphorus need, soil characteristics, and especially soil phosphorus status, as I already mentioned, and cultivation history. And of course, they should be also economical. And these guidelines, they should be used for all phosphorus sources. Then, what is the current status in the Baltic Sea region? At the moment, most countries in the Baltic Sea region are lacking regulation for phosphorus fertilization, and this HELCOM's annual flat rate limit for manure phosphorus is not adopted in many countries. In addition, status and basis of national fertilization guidelines vary among the Baltic Sea countries. For example, there is variation in what extent soil phosphorus status is taken into account in these national guidelines. Manure is also most often spread according to its nitrogen content, leading to over-fertilization with P, which of course increases the risk for P accumulation in the soil and phosphorus losses to waterways. And in conclusion, these both regulatory limits and also guidelines are needed for feed level fertilization planning. Then our second recommendation that focuses on this fertilization planning, but also nutrient balancing. First is fertilization planning. All farms, especially livestock farms in the Baltic Sea region, should plan their nitrogen and phosphorus fertilization annually at the field level and based on national guidelines, as mentioned earlier, and manure nutrient content. And they should also be based on this regular soil nutrient content determination. This soil nutrient content is important to take account to be able to avoid this over-fertilization and nutrient losses, as mentioned earlier. Then we should first utilize manure sustainably and only after then use additional mineral fertilizers if needed. And it is also essential to keep records of the fertilizer planning and use. Then nutrient balancing. SuMaNu recommends that there should be annual farm level nutrient balance calculation. In practice, this means that the difference between imported and exported nutrients in the farm, most importantly nitrogen and phosphorus. And these imported nutrients cover, for example, fertilizers and feeds, and exported nutrients, crops and other products that are sold from the farm. And why this is needed? They create information on nutrient flows and nutrient use efficiency on the farm. And if there are any needs to optimize nutrient use efficiency on the farm level. And in practice, the most important conclusion from the calculation would be that if there is nutrient surplus existing, part of the manure need to be reallocated either to another farm or to another region to substitute mineral fertilizer use. And currently this farm gate nutrient balancing is quite rarely used in the Baltic Sea region. Then related to this fertilization planning, I have here one example of proceedings that SuMaNu has had some effect. But of course, there are also a number of other actions than SuMaNu that have affected to the development during SuMaNu's duration, but at least SuMaNu has had its own role there. And this example is from Latvia, where fertilization planning will be implemented through new CAP. This far, fertilization planning has been mandatory only for farms in nitrate vulnerable zones, and it is now also decided to develop a reporting system for that purpose. Then let's move on, but let's still stay on manure management chain issues. Our third recommendation focuses on national standards for handling and spreading manure. And first is national manure standards. SuMaNu recommends that there should be developed and they should be updated these national standards for determining manure quantity and nutrient content for all livestock and manure types. This because this manure quantity and quality form the basis for both farm and regional scale measures. On a farm level, it is of course essential to know manure quantity and nutrient content to be able to plan fertilization sustainably, as mentioned already. And on the other hand, on the regional level, this data must be known to be able to assess if there are so-called hotspot areas where manure is produced. Manure nutrients are produced over the regional crop need, and thus there is needed nutrient reallocation. Thus, it is important to have these national manure standards, but it is also important to check whether the current values represent current situation and they should be updated regularly. Then manure spreading. Manure should be spread primarily in the spring and summer for growing crops, and autumn spreading should only be allowable for establishing winter crops. And spreading should be according to the manure nutrient content and fertilization plan. And this because this manure should be spread at a time when nutrients are directly utilized by crops to minimize nutrient losses. And this way we also can decrease the need for mineral fertilizers. But naturally, all of these measures will increase the need for manure storage capacity. Then, related to technologies, we should raise the requirements for acceptable practices and technologies for animal housing, manure storage, and manure spreading. And on the other hand, this means that outdated technologies with poor environmental performance should be phased out. But small farms with a limited number of livestock units could be given exceptions due to economic reasons. Then there should be established a list of best sustainable manure management technologies and practices. This means technologies that reduce, for example, ammonia, greenhouse gas emissions, and runoff and leaching. And again, of course, these all practices means investments, and thus incentives for farmers should be provided. Then the current status in this regard in the Baltic Sea region. Inefficient practices and technologies are still often used, for example, late autumn and winter spreading due to, for example, inadequate manure storage capacity and lack of suitable time slots for spreading in spring and summer. And also broadcast spreading is still used. And these outdated practices, they are often used as they are cheaper and they might be easily accessible. But especially in bigger animal farms, there is a need for modern manure handling and spreading technologies, which would help them in more efficient use of manure, despite of the limited time slots for manure spreading in spring and summer. And here I have another example of SuMaNu's role. For this example is also from Latvia. They have promoted more advanced manure spreading technologies to replace broadcast spreading. And of course, in addition to this Latvian example, all partners have disseminated our recommendations in various events, national events, and they have had also other kind of dissemination activities. Then regional nutrient reallocation. This means transporting manure from the areas of phosphorus surplus to the areas in need of phosphorus, meaning that manure processing is needed to get manure transportable form for longer distances. And to be able to do this sustainably, it should be based on regional crop nutrient need, and these manure-based fertilizers, meaning processed manure, should substitute mineral fertilizer use. Only this way, both nutrient losses and use of mineral fertilizers would decrease. First of all, we need to know the quantities and characteristics of nutrient-rich biomasses and crop nutrient need regionally. Then there should be national strategies for nutrient recycling that can be coupled with renewable energy possibilities, depending, of course, technology used for manure processing. But this renewable energy production in conjunction with manure processing would improve economic feasibility of manure processing. And as I already told, this nutrient reallocation should be based on regional crop nutrient need. Then another prerequisite is to have, of course, a demand for these manure-based fertilizers. It's not just enough that we process manure, but there have to be also markets. Thus, to create markets for these manure-based fertilizers, both production and use of these products must be supported. And at the moment, these recycled fertilizers are not a viable alternative to mineral fertilizers for farmers. And we need also demonstrations and awareness raising. Then what is the situation at EU level? As you can see from this table, manure is the biggest source for nitrogen and phosphorus among these organic side streams. And when compared to the current mineral fertilizer use, it could cover all mineral P use as well as almost all mineral nitrogen use. The problem, however, is that manure is not evenly distributed, which can be seen from these example maps. And as Sari already told, in Finland, these so-called hotspot areas are located in western part of Finland. And these same kind of regions are also in other countries. Thus, there are those hotspot areas where manure phosphorus is produced over the regional crop need, over the regional phosphorus fertilization need. And to be able to reallocate part of this manure nutrients to the areas in need of phosphorus, it must be processed. But the problem is that manure processing is not currently often economically feasible and markets are lacking. And then safety issues that are handled in our 5th recommendation. As most other side streams, also manure can contain various contaminants, such as pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, and pathogens. Our first recommendation is that antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals should be used only when necessary. And there is a link for animal rearing conditions, meaning that there should be efficient herd health management that need to be optimized so that this is possible, that we can minimize the use of pharmaceuticals and antibiotics. Then excess use of trace elements need to be avoided. They should be used according to nutritional needs. And reasons for these 2 recommendations are that there is a risk that heavy metals accumulate to the soil or end up to crops or other environmental parts, waterways and so on. And related to antibiotics, there is a risk for antibiotic resistance. Then the hygienic quality of manure and manure-based fertilizer products need to be secured. And this must be remembered, especially when manures from different farms are processed in the same processing plant. And it must also be remembered that pathogens can also originate from other feedstock that is used in that plant. And co-processing with sewage sludge need to be avoided because often this contaminant risk is bigger in sewage sludge than in manure. And this picture illustrates the sales of various veterinary antimicrobials related to the size of animal population by country in the EU. And it can be seen that there is large variation in the antibiotic use among EU countries at the moment, and thus there is also some room for optimization. And then the last recommendation, which handles knowledge transfer between different target groups. This is among the most important things, as this efficient knowledge transfer enables successful implementation in practice. First, there should be formed national manure committees to advise on manure legislation, knowledge transfer policies and research. Then, national manure knowledge transfer systems need to be established to support implementation of recommended manure management techniques and practices. And cooperation between farmers, advisors, scientists and policymakers need to be supported. We should have clear messages, and there is a need for more holistic approach when looking for solutions in manure management. And when talking about projects, preferably these end users should be involved in project partnership. And use of farming data to support nutrient management should be enhanced. Then the last two slides illustrate how all our recommendations are connected together. And this first picture illustrates farm level measures. How these good practices can effectively minimize the potential losses to the environment throughout the manure management chain, from feeding to manure spreading. And these measures are related to our recommendations 1 to 3 that would steer this optimization. There is that we should have phosphorus limit for pea fertilization and also guidelines for nitrogen and phosphorus fertilization. And this fertilization need to be planned at field level, taking into account soil nutrient content. And manure nutrient content should be determined, and we should use emission reducing techniques throughout manure management chain. And there should be this annual farm gate nutrient balancing. And these farm level actions, they are connected to regional level actions, and this annual farm gate nutrient balance calculation has a key role in that. And in this picture is described the regional level measures. And if based on that farm gate nutrient balance calculation, specific farm has nutrient surplus, part of the manure nutrients should be reallocated to the another farm. But if this specific farm is also located in the area where is a regional surplus of manure nutrients, part of the manure nutrients should be reallocated to the processing plants producing recycled fertilizing products. And to create markets support both production and use of recycled manure-based fertilizer products are needed, and these safety issues must be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you, Minna, for going through the recommendations, the policy recommendations from the SuMaNu project. We move to our next speaker on the program, who is Susanna Kaasinen. Susanna works as an associated professional secretary at the HELCOM Secretariat. Her main focus is on agriculture, nutrient recycling, and other nutrient-related issues. And currently, she is also coordinating the update of the Baltic Sea Action Plan. I'll turn it over to you, Susanna.
Thank you, Erik. I'll just share my screen. Hope you're able to see it now. All right, great. So good afternoon. I'm, as Erik said, Susanna Kaasinen. I'm working at the HELCOM Secretariat. And to add to the introduction, of course, HELCOM was one of the partners in the SuMaNu project. So we have also been involved directly in the project. And I will give a short update on what has been happening with the HELCOM Baltic Sea Regional Nutrient Recycling Strategy. And because that is very tightly linked to the update of the Baltic Sea Action Plan, I will say a few words also about the update of the Baltic Sea Action Plan. The HELCOM ministerial meeting in 2018 decided to create this strategy, Baltic Sea Regional Nutrient Recycling Strategy, to reduce eutrophication of the Baltic Sea and promote safe nutrient recycling. The focus was to be on manure and sewage. And Sari already said that the vision of the strategy is, which you can see also here on the screen, is that nutrients are managed sustainably in all HELCOM countries, securing the productivity of agriculture and minimizing nutrient loss to the Baltic Sea environment through efficient use of nutrients and cost-effective nutrient recycling. And as mentioned, there are 6 objectives to the strategy. The Baltic Sea region as a model area for nutrient recycling, reducing environmental impacts, safe nutrient recycling, knowledge exchange and awareness raising, creating business opportunities, and improving policy coherence. And there are a number of sub-objectives to all of these objectives. And in addition, there are measures under each of those objectives and sub-objectives on how to actually reach these objectives. The strategy content is such that there is an introduction, then there's of course the vision objectives, and then there are these measures, and then a section on how to follow up the strategy. So the measures function in a way as a pickup list for the countries, because as Sari mentioned, the Baltic Sea region countries are quite in different stages currently regarding nutrient recycling. So they are voluntary measures to pick up from as necessary to reach the objectives of the strategy. But in addition, it was agreed that there would be actions regarding nutrient recycling that would be included in the Baltic Sea Action Plan, and those are so-called mandatory then, as they are part of the Baltic Sea Action Plan, so that there would be an action that would fit for each objective. There would be one action, and that would be used as to follow up on the implementation of the strategy. So each of those 6 actions would be used as the follow-up tool for the strategy. And currently, the status of the strategy is such that the draft strategy has been endorsed by the HELCOM heads of delegation just about a week ago. And the aim is that the strategy would be adopted at the HELCOM ministerial meeting in October 2021. So actually we are in, the progress has been made, and we are at the final stretch with the strategy. SuMaNu has had a good input on creation of the strategy. SuMaNu co-organized, was one of the co-organizers of the HELCOM workshop and nutrient recycling measures in February 2020. This was a workshop, a kind of a brainstorming session to suggest measures that could be included in the strategy. And SuMaNu also made proposals based on the policy recommendations, which you just saw. They were in the draft stage then. And as I looked at the list of measures that now ended up in the strategy, though I have to say the disclaimer that it will be, the final adoption will only happen in October, but currently what is in this endorsed version, for example, just to name a few, are define clear joint goals for plant nutrient balances, prioritize the use of manure and other recycled nutrients as fertilizers, create regional nutrient balance and nutrient recycling strategies for each country, introduce incentives for use and production of recycled nutrients. So these are very close to the SuMaNu policy recommendations, and of course, the proposals that were made at the workshops, they were worked forward still by the countries, and some were combine and so forth. But I think also the SuMaNu recommendations are well represented in these measures that then ended up in the strategy. And as mentioned, the regional nutrient recycling strategy is closely linked to the Baltic Sea Action Plan, or the action plan, updated action plan that should be adopted also this year. And because those follow-up measures will be, or actions will be included in the action plan. So I will just say a few words about what is the status with the update of the Baltic Sea Action Plan. So if you are familiar with the current action plan, there are 4 segments there, and there will be also 4 segments in the updated action plan. You see, they are represented here in this picture by the 4 goals. So they will be the biodiversity segment with the goal Baltic Sea ecosystem is healthy and resilient. There will be the hazardous substances and litter segment with the goal Baltic Sea unaffected by hazardous substances and litter. A segment on environmentally sustainable sea-based activities, and then the eutrophication segment with the goal Baltic Sea unaffected by eutrophication. And the aim is that the nutrient recycling actions would be included in this eutrophication segment. There also then a section on horizontal topics such as climate change and financing that will be included in the updated Baltic Sea Action Plan. And the action plan was formed, or the current draft has been formed so that there were a number of actions in the current action plan that was adopted already in 2007, and those, not all actions were implemented by 2021, which was the target year for the current action plan. So those existing measures, if they are not implemented, they will be transferred to the new action plan. And in addition, there are some new measures that will be introduced, and there was an opportunity for the stakeholders to propose measures, and this is also what SuMaNu did. And so SuMaNu submitted so-called synopsis as proposals for new measures, and currently there are some of those proposals that, although slightly redrafted, that are in the current draft, but as it says here, that there are still some pending issues, so we will have to wait until the final adoption of the HELCOM at the HELCOM ministerial meeting. So the current status of the updated Baltic Sea Action Plan is that the draft was approved by the HELCOM HESO delegation just over a week ago, but there are still some issues pending. So the action plan, updated action plan, will be adopted at the HELCOM ministerial meeting in October 28. Sorry, not 2018, but 2021, of course. And then we will see in the end which actions are included there. But SuMaNu has also had an input on the update of the Baltic Sea Action Plan. And I can also say that for this new action plan, the target year of the whole action plan is that all actions would be implemented by 2030. So that is the aim of the updated action plan. But I think this was the short update on both the status of the nutrient recycling strategy and on the action plan that I plan to make. And as mentioned, it should all be adopted in October, and then after that you could see what was the final result of both these processes. Thanks.
Thank you, Susanna, for that interesting update on the HELCOM process. Our next speaker, before I introduce our next speaker, who will be Gunnar Norén, is I want to say that I forgot when I started this, when I welcomed everyone to this meeting, that this meeting is actually a joint cooperation between the SuMaNu project and Coalition Clean Baltic. It's Coalition Clean Baltic is also taking care of the technical aspects of the meeting, and Coalition Clean Baltic is politically independent nonprofit association with a network of over 23 organizations in Belarus, Finland, Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, Denmark, Ukraine, and Sweden, essentially all around the Baltic Sea. And the main goal of Coalition Clean Baltic is to promote the protection and improvement of the environment and natural resources of the Baltic Sea area. We're really happy to have this collaboration with Coalition Clean Baltic and that they're helping us put together this meeting. And the next speaker that we have, I will be very happy to introduce, is Gunnar Norén, who is a senior advisor to the Coalition Clean Baltic and has been the executive secretary for the past 25 years. Gunnar works mainly with water protection and marine issues. He's worked for the Swedish EPA and also for the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. And Gunnar will talk to us about nutrient balanced fertilization. The floor is yours, Gunnar. Thank you.
Yeah. On the topic of nutrient balance and 3 first recommendations from the SuMaNu project, which is very important. And I will go into more details after my 25 years experience with HELCOM. If I can. Okay, I have problem to, okay, I do it this way. Okay, can you see my first slide? Okay, I will focus very much then on fertilizer and not the soil. We know that the source of all nutrient leakage from agriculture comes from over-fertilization, except what comes from the air as air deposition of NOx and ammonia. More than 50% of the pollution load to the Baltic come from agriculture sector, and eutrophication problem can only be solved if agriculture and nutrient load significantly. There is no alternative to this to solve the Baltic eutrophication, because agriculture is the critical nutrient polluter.
Gunnar, sorry to interrupt, Gunnar. Could you try to put it in full presentation mode so that it's easier for everyone to see?
I have, okay.
We see the working mode for I think it should be under Visa. And then it should, on the menu at the top, if you go under Visa, you should be able to choose presentation mode all the way to the right. Längst till höger. Start info design, övergångar, animering, granska visa. Or if
I cannot get into to the
okay, well we'll just try to make do as best we can. Thanks. Sorry, you can continue then.
Okay. HELCOM have in the requirement that application of nutrients should be limited based on a balance between foreseeable nutrient requirement of the crop and the nutrient supply, with a view to minimize eutrophication. So the nutrient balance here shall be with a view to minimize eutrophication. That's measure application. We are minimize nutrient surplus, not as the end of the pipe solution. And the HELCOM requirement is actually legally binding. The annex is legally binding for all Baltic Sea region countries and farmers. So minimum nutrient surplus need to be implemented then on the national level. Today, the fertilization practice that you go for optimal economical fertilization means that farmers would like to have as high crop yield as possible, it's their own benefit. So the optimal expected yield is a reference then. Such procedure can imply very heavy level of fertilization. Fertilization applied for expected harvest for the harvest you want, and not according to the need for the crop planted. Profit for the farmer depends on the price of fertilizer, of course, and also the expected good price setting of the crop. But inexpensive can also make it profitable to over-fertilize. And we know that optimal economic fertilization practices drives the over-fertilization. Sweden, for example, about 10 years ago, had a mineral tax that was removed, and the Swedish Board of Agriculture within 3 months increased the fertilization advice for main crops with 10 more kilos per hectare. Not because of the need of the crop, but because of higher profits for the farmer. The major aspects then to control over fertilization is, of course, of setting the target yield for crops then, realistic yields. And nutrient surplus calculations must be made, and tolerable surplus limits should be developed then on the national level. Farmers should also declare how much fertilizer they take in to control if they fulfill the annual fertilization plan, to stop them additional. These aspects are important, and not only for farmers to decide on, because it have a big environmental consequences. So nutrient surplus calculations should be performed both for nitrogen and phosphorus separately at field level. And you should then develop strict surplus values, kilo per hectare. An advisory service would be relevant that they adopt and decide on the annual fertilization plan. So we have control of this fully. HELCOM ministers decided in 2003 some important decisions to have measures to reduce nutrients to reach nutrient at farm level and reduce nutrient losses. But HELCOM has so far not developed them mandatory regulations on this. So we have not fulfilled what ministers decided in 2013. I have some more detailed proposal here, how we can take the next step to control this. And to have phosphorus surplus for farms bigger than 20 hectares or livestock farming with more than 20 animal units. An appropriate surplus limit could be crop production, 20 kilo nitrogen per hectare, for animal production between 30-40. When it comes to tolerable surplus, I think you should have a zero surplus, not apply more than the crop can use annually. And this is a rule that Germany have had for many years. We also need to make nutrient soil mapping at least every 5 years, so we know what nutrient source we have in the soil. Wintergreen crops should only be fertilized for the plant growth during autumn, no storage fertilization for the growing season during. Precision fertilization is important, and this technique is now available. So we GPS maps based on crop scanning by the tractor, you can have a more balanced. And this should be mandatory for farms bigger than 50 hectares. Denmark had another system until 2015 to control over-fertilization. They applied optimal economic fertilization, reduced it with 15%, and then had strict control. Fertilizer management, of course, we need more requirement because it's easier to lose nutrient via manure. The full content should be of nitrogen and phosphorus shall be used when you make as input figures in a nutrient balance calculation for the manure. And many times you need then to do nutrient analysis. Stables should have bedding and composting to minimize ammonia emission. Manure slurry spreading should use injection techniques because we know that will reduce then ammonia emissions and take care of more of the farms. Precision fertilization using GPS maps and so on with farms bigger than 50 hectare or 50 animal units. Manure storage tanks should always be covered. Temporary storage of manure on farmers should always be covered, limited to 1 month. Manure not allowed to be spread on phosphorus saturated soils. High phosphor class where farmer of the nitrogen content, because phosphor have to be balanced all the time and the surplus should be 0. EU policies in agriculture. We know that we mentioned earlier by Minna and Sari. Pork strategy, demand and improve nutrient efficiency is a key objective. And the goals for 2030 is reduce nutrient losses with 50%, reduce nutrient fertilizer use with 20%. And ECRI has developed then the Farm Sustainable Tool for Nutrient, they call FAST. And they'll apply this or existing tools. And the interesting is that one parameter in the FAST tool is also have a balance on the main nutrients at field scale. And one variable is the target yield for the crop. So we need stronger requirements to control necessary nutrient surplus region if we in this region shall fulfill then what is will be the EU requirement. Some conclusions from my side. Agriculture sector have advised for voluntary measures to control over-fertilization, and HELCOM has so far not developed nutrient surplus limits. Ongoing major agricultural nutrient is still 50%. That demonstrates the failure to control and limit agricultural nutrient leakage with voluntary measures during 25 years with HELCOM. We need a new approach is necessary. I think we need strict limits for nutrient surplus on farmland, control agriculture sector the same way as society control wastewater sector, industry sector, with strict limits for nutrient, for nitrogen and phosphorus are set and controlled. And I think agri sector must show a willingness for more efficient measures to reduce its nutrient pollution. Change attitude, credible, sustainable sector, ready to apply nutrient surplus limits. And because the most important nutrient leakage driver in the Baltic Sea region that create Baltic eutrophication is over-fertilization practices on farmland. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Gunnar. Unfortunately, I think there was some internet issues, some technical issues, and the sound was a little patchy. But the presentation you can find the presentation on our homepage, and there you can go back and look. There's quite a lot of information that Gunnar covered in the presentation. So if there's anything that you missed because of the audio, you can go back and find it. I just that kind of finishes our first part of the program, and we were going to move into the second part of the program, which is to give some examples of inspirational examples or messages from the Baltic Sea region related to these issues and related to the policy recommendations that SuMaNu has put forth. And as Minna gave an indication to in her talk about the policy recommendations, is that the current status is quite different around the Baltic Sea. Some countries have already implementing some of the recommendations, and other countries are closer to implementing other recommendations. So to help kind of inspire along how to move forward with all these issues, we've put together a number of talks to help bring about some ideas, and we're going to move on into this because we're running a little bit behind schedule, and we're going to start with the first talk is Mr. Bruno Sander Nielsen from Denmark, and Bruno is the COO at the Danish Biogas Association. He's a biologist working for more than 30 years in the Danish Agricultural and Food Council, with different topics such as sustainability, circular economy, biotechnology, and organic production. Of his 25 years with the Biogas Association, since 2017, he's worked focusing more on political and practical issues, policy-related issues associated with this. And with that, I will turn over the floor to you. Welcome, Bruno.
Thank you. I hope, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can. Is it possible to get it into the presentation? There you go. It should work. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the introduction and the good overview of the project in SuMaNu. It's been very interesting. Just to say a few words about the Danish Biogas Association, or Biogas Denmark. We are the organization for all the stakeholders in the biogas sector in Denmark. We are, of course, promoting the production and use of biogas, but also spending a lot of effort in networking and knowledge sharing, and especially we have the knowledge experience sharing between the owners and of the biogas plants, many of them being farmers. Our members are all the producers and the users of biogas, those supplying the biomass into the biogas plants, and those using the digested as a fertilizer, and also the suppliers of technology and so on. If we briefly go into the Danish development in biogas production, you can see on the left-hand side that we had a steady, slowly increase for the first 20 years, and the last 7 to 8 years, we have had a rapid increase in the biogas production. And you can see it's the green biogas. It's from the co-digestion plants of livestock manure and organic residues from households, industry, and agriculture. And last year, we reached 21 petajoules, and that's more or less 6 terawatt hours of biogas. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see that 25 years ago, less than 40% of the biogas was produced in the agricultural-based biogas plants. Most of it was produced in landfills or in wastewater treatment plants. But right now, it's more than 90% of the biogas that comes from the agricultural biogas plants. And last year, 20% of the Danish livestock manure was digested in biogas plants, and we produced a little more than 20 petajoules of biogas, which substituted 20% of the natural gas consumption. And this expansion of the biogas production is expected to continue. This is a projection from the Danish Energy Agency made earlier this year, and they expect that the biogas production will be more than doubled for the next 10 years' time, going from this little more than 20 petajoules up to more than 50 petajoules. And you can see most of it will be injected into the gas grid, and then we can sell it to all countries around the Baltic Sea. But this is the energy consumption or the energy production in the biogas plants. But what does this mean for the agenda for today? This means that the biogas is produced from the organic residues we add to the biogas plants. And you can see on the left-hand side that more or less 80% of what goes into the biogas plants is livestock manure. And on the right-hand side, you can see that a little more than 1/3 of the biogas comes from the livestock manure. 12% of the input is industrial waste, producing 27% of the biogas. Less than 4% is energy crops, producing 10% of the biogas. But we can say that the biogas production in Denmark is agricultural based, and it's based on residues from agriculture and households and industry and industry. So when we put these figures of the expected input into the biogas plants to calculate from where should the biogas the Danish government is expecting, from what should that be produced. Those two figures here is on the left-hand side, the biogas production in petajoules, and on the right-hand side, you can see the biomass input in tons. And you can see that now on the left-hand side, we don't say 52 petajoules, but 60 petajoules. This is because the ambition of the Danish Biogas Association is a bit higher than for the Energy Agency. But you can see that most of the gas right now comes from the industrial waste and a minor part from the livestock manure. The part coming from livestock manure will increase as we digest a higher proportion of the livestock manure. But you can see one of the resources we expect to increase the use of is the straw mainly from the grain production. And on the right-hand side, you can see that livestock manure will be the most important input into the biogas plants. If we look into the utilization of the livestock manure in the biogas plants, then, as I said, right now, it's a little slightly more than 20% of the livestock manure that is being processed in the biogas plants. And this will, according to the projection of the Energy Agency, increase to at least 65%, or according to our projection, a little more than 70% in 2030. And at the same time, you can see that we will use between 30 and 40% of the straw. And of course, this has a high impact, because when we digest the livestock manure in the biogas plants, then we reduce the risk of leaching of nitrates, we reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. We have the platform to handle the livestock manure from many farmers at a regional basis, and we can have some kind of equipment to handle the digested slurry before we recirculate it back to the farmers. We can separate it and concentrate the phosphorus fraction in the fiber fraction. We can transport for a larger distance. So what is the legislation behind this? Well, the basic legislation is that when we have more than 25% of the inputs into the biogas plant is being livestock manure on a dry matter basis, then we can utilize the digestate according to the regulation on the use of livestock manure. And I guess that the Danish legislation has implemented all the recommendations you had in this project. So I can only recommend to implement those recommendations, because this has meant that the utilization of the nutrients in the livestock manure in Denmark and the nutrients in all the residues we recirculate through the biogas plants is much higher than it was 30 years ago. And of course, this means that the farmers can reduce the use of nitrogen from chemical fertilizers. We reduce the use of phosphorus from mines in Africa or in Russia. We have one special quality requirement, and that is that we have quality standards for those input materials that is not being livestock manure, where we have threshold values for hazardous substances such as heavy metals. And each of the residue stream going into the biogas plant has to meet those quality standards. And we also have quality standards regarding so that we are sure that we don't recirculate too much plastic back to the agricultural land. So we are handling 20% of the livestock manure right now, and we normally say we also handle most of the organic residues from the rest of the society in Denmark, and we also import organic residues from other countries, and this is turned into a high-quality fertilizer. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Bruno, for giving us some insight into how Denmark has been rather successful in really implementing biogas digestion of manure on a rather large scale. Next talk, where we are focused from Estonia, has made very big changes in a very short amount of time to decrease the use of broadcast spreading. And we have Dr. Kalvi Tamm here to talk about this to us. He's the head of the Department of Agri-Technology at the Estonian Crop Research Institute. And he has quite a number of years of experience working with improving manure nutrient use efficiency in agriculture. So thank you, Kalvi.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Erik, for introduction. Can you hear me and can you see my presentation?
Presentation, no. But we hear you.
Okay. Okay, moment. Yes, I should share it out. A moment. So, can you see it now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, about the usage of different spreading technologies in Estonia. And by the survey made in 2020, we saw that in Estonia, farmers use broadcast spreading to spread about 2.5% of slurry what is produced in Estonia, and yes, this amount is spread by broadcast spreading. By trail hose spreading is spread 17% of slurry. Then by incorporation spreading about 40% of slurry, and 40.5% by different injection spreading technologies or spreaders, which is used mostly for spreading on growing plants. And yeah, we have made several surveys, and they show same trend. So why is it so? In 90s, our farmers used mostly broadcast spreaders, which came from Soviet times or from as aid from Western countries, but these spreaders were pretty old and depreciated already, and in the beginning of 2000s the farmers started to look for new spreaders, and at the same time our researchers found that from international studies that there is possibility to use also technologies for slurry spreading which help to save nitrogen and is more environmental friendly, and we introduce these technologies on different conferences and in different books, and yeah, also farmers became aware about these technologies, and also this process continued in the next projects which took place in 2000 after 2010, I would say, and it continues until today. As you see, we had Baltic Deal, Baltic Manure, Green Agri, also Baltic Slurry acidification projects where we looked at which technologies can be used to spread slurry, and introduce these technologies to the farmers, and also made trials to see the effect of these technologies. So, and same time the farms were growing, and they had bigger ability to buy more expensive tractors and slurry spreaders, so they had the ability to invest to such environmental friendly technology. And also the state and European Union gave support to invest to farm machinery, and also injection and incorporation spreaders get extra points in funding evaluations if farmers ask or try to apply support for these technologies, spreading technologies. And also smaller farms can order the slurry injection or incorporation spreading from service providers. So, and what are the farmers' calculations? Why to prefer slurry injection or incorporation spreading? Because of the broadcast spreading or spreader is much cheaper than injection or incorporation spreader, and the broadcast spreading can be made much faster. If we don't calculate the time for the slurry incorporation, which should be made later after slurry spreading. Yeah, first of all, the advantage of injection or incorporation spreading is that it helps to minimize loss of nitrogen and mineral need for mineral nitrogen, but slurry should go fast to the soil, then it works. And fastest way to incorporate slurry is to make it during slurry application. So, and this is also good for environment because it pollutes less air, and is good for neighbors. There is less odor, and today farmers are aware about and they care about it. Next, the slurry incorporation during spreading, there can be combined two operations, slurry spreading and slurry incorporation, and it helps to win time and costs, and there is need only for one tractor and operator instead of new tractors and two operators. And this is important because slurry is usually applied in busy times. In times if seedbed preparation and sowing should be made in spring, or if seedbed should be prepared and slurry spread it during harvest of crops on autumn. And incorporation spreader is good tool to make stubble tillage after harvest. It mixes soil and crop residues with slurry, and it's also important. And last thing what the farmers calculate is that evenness of slurry spreading is lower by broadcast spreading and better with other spreaders. So, and today we have also a restriction in Estonia. The use of broadcast spreading for slurry is restricted between 20th of September and 20th of March, but for other slurry spreading technologies is restricted for between 1st of November and 20th of March. So I think these are the reasons why in Estonia the farmers prefer to not to use broadcast spreading but other technologies. So thank you.
Thank you, Kalvi, for giving us an introduction to how Estonia has managed to almost eliminate the use of broadcast spreading in a short time. Our final speaker will be from Sweden, Dr. Markus Hoffman, who is a doctor in soil science and works as an expert on water and nutrients at the Federation of Swedish Farmers. And Markus is going to give us a short talk about a success story in Sweden of knowledge transfer between farmers and scientists and policy and authorities, and how to build up this competence. The floor is yours, Markus.
Thank you, Erik. I can see that we are behind schedule, and maybe I'll manage to do this in 5 minutes. We'll see. Short about project focus on nutrients, Greppa Näringen in Swedish. We are celebrating 20 years anniversary this year, and we will conclude with a conference, and we are writing a booklet on our results and our experiences. As you can see on the slide, it has been hosted always by the Swedish Board of Agriculture, made in close collaboration with the farmers organization, county administration boards and advisors, of course. 60,000 farm visits, 230 yearly advisors. We have spent almost 1 billion Swedish crowns from the taxpayers and the EU taxpayers' money. And about 50% of full-time farmers are involved in the project. This shows the broadness of our work. It's not only about eutrophication, even though that's the focus. We also give advice on climate adaptation, and also on pesticides and how to use optimal feed rates. And here's a slide that shows some of the results. It shows a surplus of phosphorus in farm gate balances. So that's not field balances, it's farm gate balances. And you can see on the bars to the left, that's for farmers without animals. They have only crop production. And already from the start they had a deficit of phosphorus, and now the deficit has become even bigger. So that's of course not sustainable to in the long run. Finally, they will have to increase phosphorus fertilizer, of course, to keep up the food production. Phosphorus surplus has decreased, as you can see, on milk farms and on beef cattle farms. And we are especially proud of the enormous decrease in phosphorus surplus on pig farms. And this is done to 100% voluntary measures by farmers, not by legislation. And here is another slide to indicate results, but in a much larger scale. There's a freshwater scientist at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, SLU in Uppsala. His name is Stefan Fölster. He made a paper with some colleagues where he made a trend analysis of nitrogen and phosphorus concentration in agriculture rivers. And as you can see how he's quoted in this slide, the scientists can see that the largest decrease in nitrogen is where we have the highest activity of our campaign focus on nutrients. So that's a nice way of communicating with consumers. Also, water has actually become cleaner. That's not as a technical communication as farm gate balances. We have learned that it works to visit farms and talk about environmental measures, but you have to be systematic and enduring. It's 1 year or 2 or 3 years projects is absolutely not enough. You have to be much more enduring. We would recommend a partnership between authorities and organizations, and the advisors has to be well trained and well prepared and equipped with the appropriate calculation tools. Those tools should be scientifically proven also. About the future, we are trying to get married to another large project in Sweden. It's called LEVA, Local Involvement for Water. It's a new project funded by the government since 2019. We have employed 20 catchment officers full-time, and they are deployed in 20 different eutrophicated catchments in Sweden. And we are trying to continue the small-scale on-farm eutrophication and advice, but if we can connect it together with a catchment coordination work in the same catchment, that will be a perfect match of scales to combat eutrophication. That's where we are headed in the years to come. And this is my final slide about more development for the future. We're constructing a new advisory product on how to cultivate without glyphosate. If that will happen, we'll all see soon what happens. This year we are testing a new advisory product on biological diversity on farms without animals. And finally, we have a huge interest from the food industry for our advisory product, where we calculate climate footprint on the farm. And we have spent a lot of money developing that tool. So now we can allocate on each farm, we calculate carbon dioxide equivalents per liter of milk or per kilogram of potatoes or wheat or meat or whatever. So the food industry would really like to have these numbers, because they of course see that it's possible to market food in Sweden as climate friendly. That's like an ongoing hype right now. And personally, I'm very interested in eutrophication. So I would hope that the food industry would be as interested in our eutrophication indicators as our climate indicators, but they are not. It's much easier to sell food as climate friendly as to try to sell it as Baltic Sea friendly. That's much more difficult to address the consumers in that way. That's what we have learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus. Unfortunately, we kind of ran out of time about 13, 14, 15 minutes ago. I really appreciate everyone sticking along. We have some few questions and answers that have been popping up in the chat, and some different comments, interesting, but we're going to leave those and we will address those on our homepage, anything that's remaining, anything that's taken up or giving in the chat and the question and answers, we will address them further on our homepage. So now, if you can manage to hang on for just a few more minutes, I'm going to give the floor back to Sari Luostarinen to give a closing comment about today. And Sari, how can you sum up today?
I won't keep you long, so don't be worried about that. I just have a few words to say. I found it really inspiring and also relieving to notice that we are really. I feel that we are all trying to go forward into the same direction. We might be looking at a little bit different methods and actions, but I think we also need a lot of different types of measures to be able to work towards more efficient nutrient management in agriculture. So whether we're talking about manure or any other fertilizer products, we seem to agree that we need to start using them more efficiently and more precisely. And we have a lot of different technologies and ways to work in the agricultural sector towards this. And what we really need now, for most maybe, is cooperation and guidance and support to implement all these different measures and make them available so that the farms and the countries have a set of tools to really implement these better practices and make better use of nutrients. So in my closing words, I would like to leave you with a thought of how can we keep on learning from each other. We need some kind of platforms for this, and SuMaNu was just one small part of that. And I think we're only in the beginning of all this discussion, so we'd need to find some regular, easily reached way to continue these discussions and give these examples to each other and try to figure out how to do something similar in our own corners of the world. So I hope we can find this type of platform also in the future, now that SuMaNu is closing down, and certainly for the policy part, I think that the work done in HELCOM is of importance, and maybe we can find even better ways to use that as well as a way to bring the different actors together to discuss and share experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Sari, and it's reassuring to know that you'll be continuing to push through these messages at the HELCOM Agri Group in the coming months, and as Susanna mentioned, that the final Baltic Sea Action Plan will be decided in October. But it's good to know that you're there, cheering on these topics that we all feel are really important. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around, for attending, for participating in our event, and also another thanks to Coalition Clean Baltic for helping us arrange this and for organizing the technical aspects. We have several people behind the scenes who you haven't heard from or know that from both Coalition Clean Baltic and from the Baltic that have been helping with the technical aspects to keep this going. But thank you very much, and I very much appreciate you being here, and good afternoon or good evening, almost depending on where you are. Bye bye.